And we're back.
Whoops. Welcome to episode 211 of the No Direction Podcast, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
It has been a big month, and I'm just glad we had 3 October episodes because there has been so much to cover. One of the ones that I've been looking forward to covering the most has been the pre-release of the Game Mastery Guide, Monster and Hazard Creation Rules, which was a PDF that's been available on Paizo website. We're going to be talking about monsters with Pathfinder developer, Patrick Renee.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Hey!
Thanks for being back for the first time since January 2013.
It's been a minute, yeah.
Oh, really? It's been that long?
Well, it's been long enough that you left Paizo and came back.
That's right, yeah, 6 years. Yeah. I remember when I came back in for the interview for my current position, Lisa, I said, oh, I've been gone for 4 years. She's like, 4 years is nothing. I'm like, all right, felt like a while to me, but I guess if you've been in the business long enough, it's been a while, but at the same time, it's not been a while.
So what did you do in those 4 years?
Took a break from developing RPGs full time. Tried to just dip my feet into something else. Ended up going into marketing for a little bit. Did some copywriting, and then quit that job and moved to Hawaii to become a coffee farmer with my wife. And we did that for about a year before we said, we like Hawaii, but our home is in Washington. So we came back.
Wow.
And then the rest is kind of history.
I love that it was like, I did some copywriting and coffee farming in Hawaii.
Yeah, it turns out, I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a copywriter. And I'm like, copywriting's all right. I don't know. Maybe I'll be a farmer. And it's like, farming's okay. What I really liked was making monsters for Pathfinder. So, you never know how good something is until you try, something else. So Paizo was one of my first jobs out of college. So I didn't really have a lot of stuff to compare it to. So now that I do, I recognize what a joy it is to be able to work there.
Well, I'm glad that making monsters is better than making coffee.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, I do enjoy coffee, though. Don't get me wrong.
Is Hawaii known for its coffee?
Kona coffee, it is. Yeah, it has to do with the acidity of the soil, the climate, the elevation. It's a whole lot of stuff that most of us who drink Folgers wouldn't even notice the difference. So,
I used to be just a tea guy. I've become a coffee guy in the last few years, but it really is like I need cream and sugar to drown out that coffee taste.
Yeah. I mean, I like the coffee taste as a flavor accent, but all of my coffee drinks look like milkshakes.
I like coffee on top of my milk and cream, and sugar. Yeah.
When did you come back to Paizo?
It's been almost a year. So November last year. Yeah. Time flies.
Okay, so that was still in the playtest.
That's right. Yeah. It felt like a good time to come back. It was, a refresh for me. Felt like, I had that, came in with a new attitude, try to embody that aloha spirit, not to play it up too much, but, it's true. And so new me, new edition, felt like a good time to get back into the game. And, I had the benefit of coming in with a, while the playtest was still going on, but while we were finalizing the rules for the final rules. So I had the benefit of coming in with, fresh eyes basically. So that, I think that helped me, come in without any preconceptions, that kind of thing.
Now this is a wrestling reference, but don't worry, we'll tie back into it. Jim Ross is a wrestling announcer who was also head of talent relation for the WWE. And one of the things he would say when a wrestler felt like things had gotten stale for them is like, just leave, learn a few holds and come back. So what are some of the new holds that you learned?
Oh, that's good advice. That's funny, actually, because I've just been looking into Worldwide Wrestling RPG, if you've heard of that one.
I have, I played it with Luis at PaizoCon this year.
Luis, it's a cool game. I like that. So what kind of new holds have I learned? I think one of the best things I learned was you can't, I don't know, your own attitude and your own perception is everything, right? Like life is nothing if not your own perception of your experiences. Which is pretty, I don't know, meta, I guess. But, so in another way of putting it is if you can't change your circumstances, change your attitude. So I think going in with a good attitude, going with a smile every day, that kind of thing makes a huge difference. And if you go in with a bad attitude and I'm ready to be sour today, you're gonna be sour. So I don't know. I just try and wake up every day with a smile on my face and drink some coffee. It doesn't even have to be Kona coffee, and I feel right as rain after that.
That was getting really close to string theories. All of the world is actually in 2 dimensions, and the third dimension is a hologram.
Whoa. I don't know.
Wow. I was going to ask if you did any surfing when you were in Hawaii because you have such a chill attitude, but
Totally.
no, string theory. That's another way that we could go with that.
Did a lot of reading, actually. So yeah, I rekindled my love of books, which it's weird to admit that for a stint there a couple of years ago, I wasn't reading very much, which is a weird thing for someone who works in publishing to admit, but it's true. And now that I'm back into reading, I'm so glad. I don't know. There's so many awesome books out there, and every time I read a book or listen to a book, audiobook, I want to write. So it just gets me in that mode, and I'm like, oh man, we just finished. I started a book club over at Paizo, and we just read Born, which written by Jeff Vandermeer. He wrote the Annihilation book and the Southern Reach trilogy. Awesome sci-fi, like post-apocalyptic kind of weird future where biotech is everywhere. Monsters run the streets, and like there's this giant flying bear that hovers over the city that everyone kind of like, they don't worship it, but they stay away from it. And and I'm like, man, giant flying bear, that's right out of Pathfinder right there. The stuff writes itself. So it's been a lot of I would thank Hawaii for that, if nothing else, is getting me back, showing me that I do have time to sit down and read books.
Well, I think that's something that I think may have just been obvious or assumed, but I don't know that we've ever called it out. Do you think that working in role-playing games, a healthy reading addiction is a requirement?
I think it certainly helps. I think there's two ways of looking at it, and my old way of looking at it was my voice, my authorial voice, is unadulterated if I haven't read that much, right? I can speak the truest that I can speak without accidentally borrowing language or phrasing from other authors. But then you're also not learning from anybody except your own writing and your own mistakes, which is kind of antithetical to the whole, I don't know, humanity thing, society learning from each other. So I think it is a very good benefit to be a reader of all things. If nothing else, it's I don't know, certainly better than TV in terms of, I don't know, inspiring, especially when you're a full-time writer.
I don't know. I've been watching some good TV lately.
We are in a golden age of TV. I know I say that, and I'm like, I watch plenty of TV. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. Yeah,
there's streaming services are like, let's put $50 million into this TV series just to be the only streaming service that's left.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no.
There's some good TV out there, and there's some, and there's good movies too. When it comes to monster design, I mean, yeah, there's I don't know, there's crazy stuff that's happening all the time. I've been thinking about this one recently for some reason. It's called It Follows, and it was kind of an indie hit from like 5 or 6 years ago. I saw it in the theater. I haven't thought of it since then, but I thought of it recently, and it's just this creepy movie where the protagonist and all the people start dying mysteriously, but they never show the monster if it even has a form. They just like show them turning back, and they like see it, and it looks like them, but then they like kind of turn back and they do a double take and it's gone or whatever. It's a pretty weird movie. If you're into like psychedelic thrillers, I would say It Follows is a good one.
So I have seen It Follows. I wouldn't describe it the way you have, though. I remember you do see the monster, but it's got a different shape every time.
Like I said, it's been a couple of years. I mean, the whole what is it? What does it look like?
So we're an all ages podcast, but I know to explain It Follows, you have to go a little adult.
Yeah.
But we can use like, it's basically if The Ring, instead of watching a videotape, The Ring was an STD.
Right. Yeah. Totally. It's very much a fear of intimacy, kind of, or intimacy is the monster to some extent.
Yeah, and a lot of like, people will use you for relationships and stuff. It was a movie. I watched it. I was like, there's stuff the characters did that bugged me in like horror tropes way, but I respected how clever it was. But it's a movie I keep coming back to and thinking about, like, no, that's really smart. There's a lot of really deep metaphors going on in that
cool
movie.
one. Yeah, that is a cool one. Yeah.
So we are designing monsters conceptually in this episode, and we had some other preamble stuff, but since we're on the topic, that feels like a monster that would be very hard to execute in a tabletop role-playing game, especially Pathfinder. So let's say that was thrown on your desk. It's like, develop this has to be in Bestiary 2. What do you do?
I think we can let's say it's the ring thing. Let's say it's you read a journal in you're playing Pathfinder, you find this monster's journal or this NPC's journal, you read it, and it turns out anyone who reads that journal, or the last person to read it, a monster follows them and tries to kill them. That is basically it follows, but you're replacing intimacy with a journal. So that's, I guess, how I'd spin it within the Pathfinder world, because there's no videotapes like the ring. Or maybe it's something like a mirror. The last person to look in the mirror, the monster shows up right behind them, or something like that. A mirror has the added benefit of being a visible thing, right? So it follows as a difficult monster to do, because the spookiness comes from not seeing it or not knowing it's right behind you, that kind of thing. Whereas in Pathfinder, it's hard to represent that at the table, really, especially with a game like Pathfinder where it's all about tactical fighting, that kind of thing. So I'd probably build that in more as like a story monster that ultimately, had some kind of more recognizable form. I think that actually brings up a good topic of like, what makes a monster scary? Is it like is it the alienness of it? Is it the unknowability? I think most monsters are scary because you can't, clowns are a good example. Clowns, a lot of people don't like them because you can't tell a clown's facial expression. You can't tell like what they're feeling. It's hard to read them. And so people get scared of, a person's face if they can't tell if they're happy or sad. Same with monsters, same with even animals sometimes, excuse me, some people are kind of terrified of dogs or cat, or probably not cats. I don't know many people terrified of cats, but and an animal that you're not used to, you're like, oh, what does it want? I can't read it. I can't tell what it wants. I haven't had any experience with this. It's scary because I don't know what it's going to do. It might attack me. It might do nothing. So I think having that healthy fear of the unknown, the healthy fear of unpredictability and not knowing what's going to come next. But then at the end of that, if this is a story monster that builds up to a confrontation at the end, it does need to have a recognizable form at the end, so that maybe it turns out to be a flying bear. That's pretty terrifying. But thankfully, we've all seen enough, David Attenborough flicks to know that a bear uses claws and teeth usually, so we can predict, okay, I probably want to put on my armor, put on a shield, that kind of stuff. Maybe it shoots lasers out of its eyes, though. That I would call an underhanded trick. Unless you're going to telegraph that, it's not a very good monster if it just suddenly has eye beams. Right? So
Nog vomits lasers.
see, there's something. Maybe if it was drooling some rainbow colored ooze or something like that, that would be a good way of telegraphing that.
So I do just want to interject. There's a movie called Chopping Mall. It's an 80s horror movie where there's these automated security robots at a mall, and some teenagers are sleeping over at the mall, and the robot, something goes wrong and they start killing the teenagers. And about halfway through the movie, the robots get laser eyes and blow up one of the kids' heads. And then from that point on, they have these laser eyes and they're using them constantly. And it's just like, one, why was that ever a feature a mall security robot needed? And two, why wasn't it using it the first half of the movie?
Yeah. Did they just think, I forgot about laser eye protocol, better switch to that? Yeah, that's funny. It's kind of like in Dragon Ball Z or other like serial anime where they have to just churn out hundreds of episodes where every season they're going to fight the ultimate bad guy. He's the strongest person in the universe, Majin Buu or Cell or whatever. And then every season there's a stronger person in the universe that they didn't know about. It always seems kind of funny to me.
So you were talking about how the unknown is such a good place to create monsters from because it's scary, but you kind of need these monsters to be known in a role-playing game. They need stats. The GM needs to know what to do with them. So how do you marry those two concepts?
One of the best things I learned from James Jacobs, our creative director, who's just the best game master I've ever had. He's amazing. One of the things he does when he's running games is he never tells you what the monster you're facing in combat is, like straight up. He just, one of the most memorable encounters I remember with him was we fought this giant, 40-foot long, vermicular, kind of wormy looking being that came out of the desert, and it had, three mandibles all over its head and was crackling with lightning all over it, and this big slimy gullet with like multiple teeth, and eyes, beady black eyes, that kind of thing. And the way he describes it, it's just like, what is this thing? Goodness, and but to anyone who is studied up on their old Pathfinder First Edition Bestiary 2, that's a death worm. So I think that was one of the best tricks I learned is for game mastering, is for just describing the monster. Don't assume a meta knowledge. Don't say, oh, you're facing 5 orcs. That's not as exciting as you're facing like 5 like ravenous, I don't know how, giant hulking dudes with tusks. That's a little bit scarier than 5 orcs. So,
and a player I know, I'd also appreciate it because like I might forget that I've got favorite enemy orc, but like if I've got a character that's specialized in beating up big dudes, something might remind me to check my character sheet for something specific to that.
Totally, yeah. You'd be more inclined to ask questions of the GM, be like, "Whoa, what do I know about these things? Let me roll a recall, knowledge in P2, or a knowledge check." It just provokes a lot more interactivity, I think, between the GM and the players.
Silent Infinity in chat is saying favorite enemy, big dudes.
That'd be a fun way to do it, right? Is if like you could do a favorite enemy like size type kind of thing. That'd be kind of cool. Like I'm an expert rat
enemy
large. Stomper. Yeah.
There's some other questions I had from earlier. We might get back to them at one point, but we're fully into the monsters right now. So, what is your philosophy when you're facing a monster? Just like flat out, you have to create a monster from scratch. What's the first thing you usually do?
I take a walk is the first thing I do. I go out into. I have the benefit of living in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, but no matter where you live, I think there is intrigue everywhere in the world. Like in the cracks of the sidewalk, or in the, if you look in the gutter, you might find a spooky red balloon or something. Don't follow the balloon, but I go outside and I walk around. And I look at the trees and I look at the stuff. I took up bird watching a couple of years ago, and I think that I don't know if that ties directly into monster design, but it sure has made me notice things a lot more than I used to. So, feathers are a pretty weird thing, but I digress. But I look for natural features that I could borrow and attach to a being that you wouldn't normally suspect. One of the classic ways to come up with a new monster is you take a little from column A, take a little bit from column B, mash them together. You have a Sphinx, you have Manticore, you have a XYZ, Chimera, anything. That's one of the easiest ways to make a monster, I think. One of the best monsters I came up with in my homebrew game when I was a teenager was a basilisk, but instead of scales, it's got crystals. It's made of rocks. It's kind of cool, right? So, and what's that? I don't know. What's that even look like? Does its blood still petrify you? When it petrifies you, you don't turn to stone. Maybe you turn into a giant crystal thing. That's kind of cool. Maybe your fellow party members say, well, Jim sure got turned into a crystal. Pretty expensive to revive him, but we could make a lot of money if we sell this giant crystal statue we have of our buddy all of a sudden. It opens up a lot more opportunities.
If they're diamonds, you can use Jim's dead body to resurrect your other dead friends.
Right? Exactly. His brave sacrifice.
Which would have used dust.
Exactly. 5,000 gold pieces worth I need.
Material component, Jim.
So that's like one of the best ways to, if you're like in a pinch, I think just, what's that movie, like Anchorman or something? You just look around the room, you say a lamp and this is awful, but a lamp and a door. Nope, you wouldn't do that. But you'd do something like that. Maybe you'd say a lamp cat, a cat with a light bulb instead of a head. That's pretty terrifying, to be honest. I think combining two different things is a good way to start with monster design. Other than that, of course, there are more. If you're looking for like aberrations, is a really hard monster class design, I think, because they're aberrant, they're inherently unknowable, right? They're like Lovecraftian weird monsters like Gugs and Gogateth and stuff like that. Just weird stuff that doesn't exist. Like what's this even from? So when I think of those things, I think of slimy things, I think of pointy things, and I think of dark things, right? So dark because you can't see it as well, so it's kind of spooky. If you see like when I was living in Hawaii, they have these spiders called cane spiders. They're totally harmless, but if you're terrified of spiders, or even just have a healthy fear of spiders, they're awful because they are this big and they move at like they're like one of the fastest spiders in the world. They can move like 3 feet or 3 meters per second. So like they'll just like skitter across your room in the blink of an eye, and they carry their babies. They carry their egg sacs in their mouth. So when you see, right, so you'll see them sometimes and it'll have a big white sac under it, and that's it carrying around its eggs with it because they don't weave webs. So thankfully you can't walk into a web and walk into a cane spider web, but you have to look at these horrible things that skitter around your room at night. And at night, the only thing that you can see of them is a glint, like their eyes, like which reflect even the palest moonlight, right? So anyway, that's one of the monsters that can come straight from Hawaii. Is this horrible spider? But so I think of like darkness. What can't I see? I think of slimy things like a sticky egg, a sticky egg sac. That's pretty gross. And I think of pointy things like a nasty spider's teeth. So those are things that I would add to any aberration. I think you could attach those to any kind of animal base, and you got yourself a good monster.
I think one of my favorite things about aberrations is when it's either pick a body part, it's that body part, like either a lot of it or just one really big that. Gibbery mouther is just mouths.
A bunch of mouths, yeah. Like with like it or Adam's Family, that's topical, right? Cousin It's little hand thing, or no?
No, Thing. Thing is the hand.
Thing. There we go. Thank you.
It is the hair. Both good examples of what we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Both kind of aberrations. Yeah. Ooh.
Like two.
Yeah. That's. Huh?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no. I was just I need to see the Addams Family. Apparently they
the Aberrations family.
That's right.
One of my favorite things to go for making a monster, if I'm trying to make something horrific, is to take a standard animal, like maybe a horse, and then just extend and pervert the proportions so its like neck is just a little bit too long and its front legs are muscled and just a little bit too crooked, and its mouth is just stretched out just a little bit too far, and like just like try to make the animal version of the Uncanny Valley, and that thing will haunt your nightmares.
That's a good.
It's a koala, but he's so muscular, like just ripped. Like, I mean, look at those abs.
Yeah, that is the Nihilith, really, from the new bestiary, right? Is this? It's just a sloth, but it's kind of mixed a little predator in with it. Like it's got horrible, inky skin instead, and a bunch of teeth where it shouldn't.
Yeah, sloths are definitely like this close to being one of the most horrifying creatures on the earth.
They really are. They're so cute, and they had such a moment, I think. But boy, you look at them in the wrong light, and they are not cute. Yeah.
I want to go back to when you were talking about It Follows, and you speculated that maybe a mirror instead of a videotape. And then when you're talking about going on a walk, it's like, okay, so just if we're talking about reflective surfaces, you can look at what's reflecting back at you, and that's the places that you can put it in. It's just not really a question. It's just things that you have said. They are adding up to just really inspirational ideas.
That's good. I'm glad they're adding up to ideas, at least. Mostly it's just rambling, but as long as it, I'd like to think it'll Tarantino itself at the end, and everyone will go, oh, obviously. So we'll see. It's mostly just ranting, though.
So, Silent Infinity from chat, who is Rob Pontius, one of our newest network members, kind of recognized my description as the tick belong, and that brings up another interesting inspiration for monsters from Paizo. You all also grab monsters from common myth and not always European fantasy myth.
We do. Yeah, that's one of the first monsters I wrote for Paizo when I was first getting started in the year. Oh, the year 2011 was the. It was for Serpent Skull. It was the Biloco monster, which is also known as Eloco. It's a African kind of little pygmy person with a crocodilian features, and its whole shtick is that you'll hear a bell out in the middle of the woods. You'll be in the jungle, like kind of just doing jungle stuff, looking for food or whatever, and you'll hear a bell, and what the heck, and you'll look around, and if you follow the bell, I think it captures you. Oh, and it eats you in one swallow. Is kind of its whole thing. So that's kind of a hard monster to. We obviously took some liberties with that and didn't make it so it can swallow you in 1 second. I guess it could just swallow you whole, but the idea. A lot of monsters from folktales are you see it and you die. And that's not a very satisfying Pathfinder monster, so we do borrow like 80%, I think, from a lot of folktale monsters, and then we kind of finesse the rest, so it's a bit more fun to play. One of the most recent, and you'll see this in Extinction Curse, the adventure path coming up after Age of Ashes, is we borrowed from Breton and Celtic myths and kind of stuff like that, because the Isle of Kortos is an island. It's and there's a pocket on the west side called the Swordlands, and it's very like farmland and very just idyllic pastoral countryside, that kind of stuff. But what comes with those pastoral idyllic countrysides are plenty of urban legends, plenty of mythological creatures, and Breton and Gaelic and Celtic mythology is just full of these creepy forest monsters like the Jan Gantitan, or I think it's the Jan Gantitan. It's just a stretched out dude, just a guy with stretched out features, like you were saying, Perram. It looks like a person, but it's all stretched out. And then the other thing that's weird about him is that he's got instead of fingers, he's got candles for fingers. And so and so you'll be walking through the forest in the middle of the night, and you'll see a light, and you'll think, oh, fellow traveler, thank goodness I'm lost. I'll ask this traveler for help. But the Jan Gantitan is chaotic neutral to a T. So this creature might help you, might not. It just screamed Fae, right? I mean, it screams a totally capricious, weird creature that comes from a primeval world that plays by its own rules, and that was a lot of fun to adapt into a role-playing setting, right?
Man, there's so
there was
many
a monster in an old dragon
possibilities
magazine
there.
that always stood out to me. It was the Madar, which is the male of the Medusa species, and it instead of having a petrifying gaze, it turns stone to flesh with a touch.
Oh,
And in the description, it talks about how the Medusa freezes them, then they smash the statue, and then he turns it back and they eat it.
oh,
And it really just felt like someone was looking at the Medusa, and it's like, how does this thing eat? If everything that sees it turns to stone.
That's
and
clever.
Then they extrapolated from there and created a monster based on like ecological needs of a more famous monster.
That's a great shtick. It's kind of like a Midas, like a haunted Midas.
Like King Midas?
Yeah, well, everything you touch turned to gold, right? Yeah, imagine if everything you touched to flesh. That's like some Hellraiser stuff right there.
Just going up the stairs. Oh, I've gone through the stairs.
Dang it! This doorknob again. Oh, these doorknobs.
Yeah, no, that's much worse than Midas.
Yeah. At least his said some practical. Yeah, but hey, if you could eat it, yeah, man, eat it. I mean, what? Salt that doorknob, whatever. Put a little Cajun on it. It's a good doorknob. That's an interesting creature, a Madar, huh? That's a good point. Is thinking about where does a monster fit in ecologically with other monsters. The Golem is it's one of my favorite new monsters from the first bestiary of Pathfinder Second Edition. Right? Is this just skittering, horrible giant spider? It's kind of like a giant spider, right? And at first you're like, oh, it's a giant spider. What's that about? I've seen those. But then, as it moves, it makes these clacking noises. It makes popping noises as its joints are like continually popping. Boy, that's awful. And they emit this keening wail. that they apparently sing with each other with, and boy, it's a creepy monster. All of a sudden, and it fits in ecologically in the Darklands great because they're the classic Darklands monsters that you think of, like the Neothelid and the that's obviously a big monster. It doesn't show up very often, right? Because it's such a big deal. But you run across Drow and Drugar and Svirfneblin and all that stuff, and there's got to be something that who scares who boogies the boogeyman, that kind of thing. So. So it fits into that ecological niche in that it eats Drow and Drugar and that kind of stuff. So if you can think of a monster that is a monster to your monsters, I think that's even more compelling, right? Because all of a sudden, then it's not just we're fighting these Drow cultists. They're obviously we got to take out the Drow cultists. It's like, oh, they're only cultists because they need to, they need to summon a demon that can fight a Gogateth. Like if we just take care of the Gogateth, they won't summon this demon anymore. That kind of thing. It's kind of cool to create, what is it? A friend or an enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. So if you can create that situation, I think that's a compelling
Except for
as well.
friend is now ever going nightmares in the future.
Yes, that's right. Hey, an enemy of my ever-growing nightmares is my friend.
So I just chuckled there because Perram shared a picture of the Gogateth. That's it, right? Gogateth. Yep. He happened to choose one that was covered in googly eyes.
Oh,
I have to work quickly back here, gang. I can't.
Seriously, you found that faster than you found the actual art? So I happen to have the bestiary next to me, and I've opened it up because I was intrigued by you're talking about how the joints pop. I didn't remember that about the creature, and it's actually not in the mechanics. So how often do you introduce lore and background to a creature without any regard to how this might play out mechanically?
That's a good question. For that kind of thing, I can think of a mechanical angle for it, right? It could have like a really, it could be really easy to detect, right? It could make this noise and you could hear it echoing down the halls. So you'd be able to, hear it coming. It would have a really bad stealth or something like that. But in the description, in that same lore, it says, it can silence its pops and stuff if it wants, which makes it even worse that it can voluntarily do these clicks and pops. It does. Awful. So it's kind of a tricky balancing act, right? Because when you're designing a monster, you have to consider the practical ramifications, which are this monster's probably going to be at the table for 3, maybe 4 rounds tops, usually, right? I mean, you don't want a combat to drag on too long, unless it's like an epic boss fight, in which case that's different. But run-of-the-mill monster, standard fight, you don't want it to take up several hours of gameplay, usually. So what that means is that you don't need to give it more than a couple abilities, right? Because it's only going to have 3 or 4 turns before it goes kaput. So that's one thing I really like about this new edition of Pathfinder is that monsters, since they're no longer built strictly like PCs, they don't have to, like spellcasting monsters, for instance, don't have to have cantrips, first level, second level spells, all the way up to 8th or whatever they have top, because they're not going to use magic missile if they have fireball, right? So I mean, they might, but they probably won't. So that's one of the benefits of this new system is that you can really focus in and save the word count, which is our fancy way of saying save the space on the page. For you can save that for the coolest abilities, the abilities you really want to showcase on camera, on the screen, on the at the table. So the skittering, cracking, popping, Gogateth thing. Pretty cool, pretty spooky. I think a GM would work that in as a flavorful, kind of foreshadowing or a build up to the fight. But at the end of the day, unless it's some supersonic, keening whale or something like that, it's not going to be practical in combat. So why include it in the stat block?
We have one request for a monster to talk about in chat. It's from John Bastille. He wants us to conceive a coffee golem. Before we get to that, Perram, can you remind people how they can get in touch with us during a live episode?
Why, of course, we record every episode live in front of a Twitch audience at twitch.tv/no direction. And if you want us to answer a question and you can't join us live, you can do so in advance on our Discord channel over on nodirectionpodcast.com and click the Discord link.
That reminds me, I got to check Discord to see if anyone had any requests for monsters. But so just off the top of your head, Patrick, you hear coffee golem. What is the first thing you know that is going to be unique to this monster?
It's got to be ceramic, right? I mean, if we're talking like a golem made out of coffee, that sounds like an ooze to me. Unless it's like a coffee bean golem, that's interesting too.
That's where you're going with ceramic. I mean, is this like the Kool-Aid man that hopped up on caffeine?
Well, it's like a coffee cup, right? So yeah, kind of like that. Kool-Aid golem, there we go too. It'd be like one of those wax twist. You pinch the top off those Kool-Aid little guzzlers. What do they call them? Or like a Capri Sun golem. We got
favorite enemy walls.
Yeah, that's right. We could make golems out of every drink, I think.
So it sounds like you're starting with visual.
I do think a visual, yeah. I do think, well, how am I going to talk about this to the players at the table, right? So I'm one of my weak points is improvisation. I try to get better, but when somebody's asking me like, "Well, describe the monster," I have a hard time coming up with details right on the spot. So it really helps to have art that's really evocative. So one of the best things we get to do when we're developing Pathfinder is write the art brief. We get to write what's this monster look like. So and artists, the artists that we hire, they're not always in it for the poetic flowery language. So we try to describe them in a very simple way. We say this is a golem like this golem, and then we point to a reference, except it's made of a ceramic like this coffee cup. Point to this other reference. So combine those two, and then it's leaking coffee from its joints and that kind of stuff. Kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, it's starting to look like C-3PO the more I think about this thing. I don't know, like rusty C-3PO.
Do you mean R2-D2? Because C-3PO was just the gold dude.
Yeah, but didn't he have to he had to oil his joints, right? So because he was all creaky, he was like, I can't move.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe he needs a little bit of coffee or something like that. I think a coffee golem would probably be weak to. Well, it needs a weakness, right? Because golems are always susceptible to some spell. So what would it? It would probably be weak to. I mean, slow, right? Because that would just harsh its buzz.
Nice.
Right.
Well, if you listen to coffee fanatics, they're all like the more black and pure it is, the better. So it would have weakness to cream and sugar.
Oh yeah.
So I was thinking weakness to cold, because once it cools down, coffee's just gross.
Oh, wrongo. But you've never had that. Yeah, I mean, maybe susceptibility to water, because watered down coffee is pretty gnarly. Or maybe it's got maybe when it gets down to the bottom of its HP, right? When it's only got 10 HP left, it's just the grounds of it. It's really gnarly and gritty. So there's nothing worse than the bottom of the cup, right? So
I was thinking it could be start off as the grounds, little mud golem made of disgusting coffee grounds, and then just use the blood of adventurers to brew up a new batch.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it needs the blood in order to become a full cup of joe. Yeah, I like that. That way, and then how does it make more of itself? That's another question, right? I mean, golems don't really do that, but this is interesting. One of the monsters I wrote for Wardens of the Reborn Forge, however many years ago, was a gunpowder ooze, which I thought was a pretty fun idea. Because oozes are, I think, a totally underrepresented monster because spooky, right? I mean, it's an ooze. I don't know. It's like this blobby thing. That's terrifying to me. Because you ever you ever clean out the grease trap at the bottom of your barbecue? It's just the worst. So a coffee ooze that writes itself, right? I mean, that's just it's just coffee. It's moving around super quick. Maybe it tries to get in you, and then suddenly I don't know, you have to go to the bathroom really bad or something. Maybe that's its power. So when I think of a monster that comes from real life like this, I think of what are the elements from real life that most people associate with, say, coffee, or say a horse that's got an elongated face, that kind of thing. It's probably got more teeth. I think of a horse's teeth. They got a bunch of spooky chompers. So I think it's probably got even worse chompers. I think of that Kelpie drawing from Bestiary 2 or 3, if you remember that at all, which is that spooky like skinless horse thing that turns into people. Kelpie, another one from Mythology. Yeah, spooky stuff. There's spooky stuff everywhere. That's what I'm trying to say at the end of the day, right? That's why I take a walk, is because you just like look at a puddle and you're like, oh man, that leaf is pretty gnarly. And then you're like, why have we never done a leaf golem? And the answers are obvious, but they're also not, right? You always,
So I'm not convinced you haven't done a leaf golem.
that's true. We've definitely done a wood golem, which is one step away. Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot about the concepts and about like getting them visually interesting and tying them into the story, but how do we make them interesting at the table when it's time to roll initiative? How do you make a monster interesting for the players to fight?
That I think that all comes down to telegraphing, right? And so that's a word I picked up a couple of years ago. That I picked it up at the school where I was doing marketing. It's this great concept. You always want to you want to transmit to your players like what's going to happen before it happens, but not directly. You want them to like. So it happens in video games all the time. Video games telegraph great. Their monsters are always telegraphing because when the big boss winds up its fist and starts doing this, it's about to throw a haymaker because it's telegraphing that to you. It's like doing this thing and so what's coming next. If a dragon starts to breathe suddenly and rear back, you expect it to breathe fire or whatever. So I think telegraphing is probably one of the most important things to do at the table when you're talking about monsters, right? It's no fun to be surprised. Like cheap shots aren't fun, right? So it's not fun if the stretched out horse suddenly starts spewing coffee out of its mouth. I mean, maybe that's fun, but you should probably describe that it has like coffee all over its. It's got weird coffee face, and that's its name right there. Boom, it writes itself. And so you have to tell the players somehow. You have to and what we do when we're writing them in the bestiaries and the APs and stuff is we try and include that in the description. We also try and include that in the stat block. It's one thing to say this monster drains your blood, like you gained the drain condition. That's interesting, I guess, but it's more interesting to say, it lashes onto your neck and then starts sucking the blood right out of your neck and drinking it. That telegraphs a bit more, and you're able to say to the artist, okay, it's got teeth that can puncture and suck blood, and then the GM can describe to the players, it's a big gnarly monster with teeth. So telegraphing is everything, I think, when it comes to having an enjoyable monster experience. Yeah, I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
Now, one of the ideas that I've gotten out of this coffee golem is that as treasure, you can brew it into a potion of haste.
Oh, like
Is that like that? It's unusual to have unique treasure for a monster, but is that something that you'd be willing to explore, or is it like, oh, it's too off the page, it's too far from what we usually do?
I mean, I'd put that in the description, right? And the way we do that is there's always a way to do that. Is you stay cagey by saying some alchemists know the secret formula to turning coffee golems into haste potions, and that way the GM can say, "Oh, well, I just give them this formula. I teach them how to do that, or I give them the option, or they can say, I'm just going to ignore that." The problem it happens, and this is something that you can get away with in video games because they're the self-contained environment with the rules are very strictly laid out. In The Witcher or Monster Hunter or whatever, you can collect animal hides, monster parts, owlbear teeth, and then you can turn that into something else. But in Pathfinder, it doesn't really work like that because you suddenly have this whole microeconomy. You have this entire monster economy where it's like, whoa, we iced that owlbear. Like, we don't need to go into the rest of the cave, guys. We can like fashion this thing into a rug and sell that for 20 gold pieces, and we're set. So it creates a weird economy. It's really just a practical concern, a kind of economical concern. But the way we get around with that is a sidebar or in the description saying, some people make owlbear rugs out of these, and the GM has the leeway to use that or not.
So you said owlbear teeth, and it got me thinking, do owlbears have teeth?
Oh,
And so I just did a quick Google image search, and about half the time the art includes teeth, and sometimes it's just the
wow,
beak.
really?
I was just thinking of the old folktale things, folk saying around here, rarer than hen's teeth.
Oh, there you go. Man, I mean, well, and then you look at some. You ever seen the inside of a penguin's mouth? There's some Cthulhu stuff right there.
Oh no, no,
Check
no,
that
no,
out.
no.
I don't know if those are teeth or what. I don't want them anywhere near me. So.
Well, I'm not looking it up just because of the wording that you gave me, but I'd imagine, is it kind of like a whale's teeth or whales, whatever they call those?
Oh, that's like their baleen or whatever,
Yeah.
right? The baleen is kind of like weird little like tooth threads, is kind of my understanding, right? You can like it's kind of like a broom. You can stick your hand through the broom bristles, whereas the penguin has like horrible, gnarly hooks that are kind of like a cat's tongue. If you ever looked up at it, there's
Oh,
another
yeah.
scary
I
image.
just found a picture.
There you go. Yeah, it's and the reason that penguins have those horrible hook things on the upper and bottoms, on the insides of their beaks or bills or whatever they are, is that a fish, when they catch it, it'll basically like forks it down. Is they're able to like, I don't know. It's kind of like a finger trap, right? They can go one way but not the other.
Ugh.
I mean, yeah, nature. Like I'm saying, just watch a David Attenborough flick. You think you know everything. It's like I've been making monsters for a couple of years now, and it's like I know animals. I've seen most of the animals out there, and then you learn about penguin teeth, and you're like, well, I don't know anything.
This is why I'm glad as mammals we developed peristalsis.
Oh, peristalsis, whipping out the big words, whipping out the SAT word. Is that just teeth? Is that fancy word for epidermis?
No, it's because as beings we're filled with fleshy tubes. It's how the tubes contract to make things move through them in the direction we want them to move through them.
Okay, like capillary action kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I like the idea of describing humans as just full of fleshy tubes.
A collection of tubes.
I mean, really, that is most of our insides is various shaped fleshy tubes.
So this is appropriate because I had an idea for a monster that we could talk about, and it's, we've got skeletons are like, what if they shed the flesh and it's just the skeleton walk around? So what about an undead creature that's just the flesh? It's just monsters and sinew. And I was thinking of like, it could flex its muscles, take a humanoid shape, but it can also just deconstruct itself into piles of bloody goo. I have no idea what I would call that. So that's my first challenge. What would this flesh monster, what's an appropriate name for that creature?
I think one of those exists. The skin kite?
It's called a shred skin, actually. So
man,
you have a great mind for monsters, Ryan. Because
I haven't even got to where they use their skin like a whip, like a wet towel whip.
Oh, that's good. I like that. The shred skin shtick, if I recall, is that it's like a flayed person. It's like a person's skin. It's just the skin, and it can like wrap itself around other undead or humanoids and kind of pretend to be you. Right? It's like, oh, I'm not Tim anymore. I'm Jim, back from the dead. I saw what you did with my crystal body. That kind of thing.
So, Perram, I'm glad you were able to find it because when I searched shred skin, I got a variety of weird things, including some really shredded dudes.
Sweet.
And a skin for your gun. And someone just peeling a lot of skin off her cheek.
Really shredded dudes are pretty good monsters. That's a good base right there. If you play, Ryan, you and I were talking about Pokemon a little earlier. Pokemon games are funny. They're so funny to me because half the time I'm looking at the Pokemon and I'm like, that's just a guy. Like, that's just a guy. They have them in the first ones too. Machamp. It's just a guy. One of them has 4 arms, but they're just dudes. They're just really strong dudes. And we have Icorche from Bestiary 3, Pathfinder 1, which is just a skinless dude. And the reason he's spooky is because he doesn't have skin, and he's also holding a skull.
Always?
Always. Yeah, I think he just carries that around. I think that's his coffee mug.
I mean, that's also a Pokemon. That's Cubone.
Oh yeah, it's just a guy. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, Cubone's that's the talk about dark Pokemon. Yeah, they don't tell you. They act like they're cute and fluffy, but that one's wearing the skull of another Pokemon.
So, as I understand it, he's always wearing his mother's skull?
Yes.
Yeah.
Always.
That's right.
But at some point, his mother was using that skull. Like, where are the Cubones without the skulls? What are they called? Like, Ecologically, this creature confuses me.
Uh-huh.
The mating habits of different animals can sometimes be gruesome if you study them.
I thought you were going to talk about mating habits of Pokemon, and I did not know where this was going.
I'm sure they are, though. Gruesome.
No, actually, like the first generation Pokemon comics from Japan were like explored some of these ideas a little bit more in detail and darkly, and is not a fun read. All of those releases got censored heavily in the US releases. And this is before the cartoon came out.
I'm sure. Well, in the most recent games, I mean, it's pretty great. You just drop off 2 Pokemon at the nursery, and the nursery owners are probably just the worst business people ever, because they always tell you, they say, "Don't know what happened. We looked away, and then there was suddenly an egg." And it's like, you have one job. Just watch my like, you've been doing this full time. You don't know how they make eggs. I have a couple guesses.
Also, the entire Pokemon universe is egg-based.
Yeah.
And if every single animal, this makes me think that humans in Pokemon verse are also egg-based.
Oh.
Huh.
I mean, yeah. If you put I mean, I was always confused how they turn into a red beam of light when you put them in the Pokeball. What happens? You throw the Pokeball, it turns into a red silhouette, and which indicates to me that it's some sort of computer program. I'm like, maybe this is all a simulation. Pokemon lore, there's some deep cuts. Tune into my Pokemon Deep Lore podcast. Just kidding, but I want to start that now.
Actually, so there's like 10 million Pokemon out there, right? And
Yeah.
when you're designing monsters, what is the likelihood someone's like, "Oh, that's just like a Pokemon"?
Oh, thankfully, Pokemon is geared toward a E for everybody kind of audience, and our game is a little bit more like we can have a dude without flesh. So thankfully there's not so much overlap, but I'm trying. There are definitely Pokemon that are monsters. I mean, there's Muck, which is just a pile of goo. It's just an ooze monster. It's a black pudding. There's I don't know. They do some good monsters. You want to talk about good monster design? Yeah, Pokemon, they got some pretty good monsters too. That's a hot take. Take it from here. But
Well, actually, just from my generation, where Pokemon was just kind of becoming a thing as I was growing out of that kind of stuff, that's a good place to mine for just images of monsters that I'm creating that I know my players won't be familiar with, and I could probably find a variety of poses for any given Pokemon that's out there.
That would not work for my players. My players would instantly know exactly what Pokemon it was, the number it has, which Pokedex to look it up in.
They would love this game then. There's a great you can, if somebody with Google Who can find it, I'm sure, but it is it's a Pokemon image face swapper. So it'll take the face from one Pokemon and put it on the body of another, and you can just hit random over and over again. Boy, you get some spooky results. So there you go that's the monster art right there. You put the head of a Bulbasaur on Dratini's body. Yeah, it's a pretty spooky looking monster.
Wow. Luis in chat found the link.
There it is. Thanks, Luis.
Yeah. Pokemon.alex. Alex on anger, Alexon's anger. Anyway, we'll try and remember to put it in the show notes.
It's a nice plug. Yeah. Pokemon. Yeah, we'll plug Pokemon. This one's for free, Pokemon. Don't worry.
I just combined Magikarp and Mr. Mime, and yeah, it's something special. Perram, I'm gonna include it in chat, and you can share that with people.
Oh wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that really, because it's 2 completely different silhouettes and body types,
and it changes
just
the colors.
instantly created it.
Yeah, that's great. That's definitely one thing I do if I'm looking for inspiration. I said I'd take a walk, but there is great monster art out there on the internet. There's websites like DeviantArt, which I think is still a thing. There's Instagram. There's people are drawing all sorts of stuff. Inktober is almost over. It's like an Instagram challenge where you draw a sketch every day for 31 days. People are drawing all sorts of wicked cool monsters out there, and that's just a good inspiration, especially for at the table. If I'm making something totally wholesale new cloth, if I'm doing something off the clock, it's not going to hit publication. I'll take a monster from somebody's drew and stat it up and be like, this is the monster.
I had a question and I've lost it, so I'm just going to go to my notes where it says "Where Llama?" Go.
Where Llama?
Where Llama?
Llama. I like that. Llama, definitely in Druma. Oh wait, those are I can't remember if those are alpaca or llama. I'm a bad llama fan.
Bad Llama fan.
Bad llama fan. There was a great llama or alpaca drawing in Druma, the Druma campaign setting book that we released last year. Was it last year? This year? Whenever. That is pretty cute. It's like a shiny fleeced llama, right? So it's like its fleece is prismatic and so white that it reflects all the colors of the rainbow, which is a very difficult thing to draw, a very difficult art to to get, but I had to like that.
Does it take a very special artist relationship to get good monster art?
I mean, our art directors are amazing. They develop, entire stables of artists that they get to know, and we see our artists at conventions and that kind of stuff. So it's, you can get awesome results from an artist you've never worked before. You can get awesome results from someone you have worked with before. When you're working with an artist you've worked with before, you have the benefit of having a rapport and that kind of thing, and they can kind of pick up on your turns of phrase and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it does help to know the artist, I think, to a certain extent. I mean, one of the stories that I heard a long time ago that always just cracks me up is that it's best just to use really, just, I don't know, really simplify it, because the artist, I mean, they'll draw something awesome, right? But less is more sometimes. If you give like a lot of description, I think this is true at the table too. If you give too much description, people aren't sure what to latch onto. I think of like 3 bullet points when I think of a monster's like look, right? Any more than that, you're just going to confuse people. They're going to latch onto the wrong thing. They're going to be like, no, wait, you said it had a funny looking scale on its face. I thought that was its weak point. That's, so one of the best stories I can remember is Wes Schneider told me they ordered a man-eating tree, and it's supposed to be like a spooky tree that eats people, but man-eating, that phrase didn't translate for whatever reason, and the art we got back was a guy taking a big bite out of a chunk of wood, and so we stopped using man-eating in that for phrasing art briefs.
Does that art exist? Like, did you?
I don't know. It's somewhere on the server.
I have seen this art. They showed it off at Gen Con one year.
Oh, you've seen it, Perram? Great. Yes.
I was kind of hoping that you just turned it into a totally different monster, just a giant that goes around eating trees.
A guy, yeah, some guy with pica. It's just a guy. Yep.
John Bastille in chat says, "Do you own the rights to the monster if you make one up?"
Everything we do at Paizo is contractually under Paizo. So anything we create on the clock at the office is owned by Paizo. Same with our freelancers. If you write for Paizo, it's in your contract that Paizo owns it. So the short answer is no. But you do get your name in the author list, and you can tell all your friends. We're all pretty chill, obviously. Like you can say, "Yeah, I made this monster," and we won't say, "No, you didn't. Paizo made it." Well, yeah, you made it. Yeah, it was cool. So you can't reprint it anywhere. It belongs to Paizo at that point.
I am kind of surprised by the question, because your answer is exactly what I was expecting you to say. I really did not expect you to surprise me there. Bastille, were you looking more for a created by credit, or was that did Patrick get it? Was that the question you were asking? But if you were an independent, put out a monster book on RPG now.
Oh, just like intellectual property law in general. Like, if you come up with the idea for a thing, do you own that thing? That is a very complicated answer. I do not believe any of us here are intellectual property lawyers. But my understanding that is...
Patrick, can you confirm? Not in between copywriting and coffee?
No, I sit next to Ron, though, and he is a lawyer.
Yeah.
I can ask him tomorrow at the office.
Yeah. I mean, that is alphabetically the next one on my big book of future careers.
There you go. You've got to put your ranks in barrister. Yeah. As far as no, not a lawyer, not legally, this answer, not legally binding, but as far as I know, when you create something, it belongs to you. You might have to prove that in court if somebody takes you to court.
Bestial just says monster farming.
Yes.
I believe
we are going
ranch
over an
monsters,
hour
you
at this
don't farm
point,
them?
so I think it's a good time to wrap things up. But let's just focus on some of the changes from 1E monster conceptualizing to 2E, and what are some of your favorite aspects of it?
Sure. One of my favorite aspects right now is that no longer do monsters have invisible resistances or immunities. That was one of the things that I was a pretty seasoned Pathfinder player, like first edition, and I still forgot what demons were resistant to and immune to. It was like fire, electricity, acid, or something like that, right? And it was weird that it was every demon for no conceivable reason. So one thing we did in second edition is we kind of just got rid of those invisible immunities, and what's more satisfying than it's not very satisfying to hit a monster with your flaming sword that you just got and it doesn't do anything because they have fire immunity. What's more satisfying is hit it with your flaming sword, it does the normal amount of damage. Even better than that is hitting it with your fire sword and it does extra damage, right? So rather than having resistances, we now focus on weaknesses. So a monster, we really try not to give them that many resistances or immunities. And when they do have immunities or resistances, it should be pretty obvious. Like a golem, made of steel, for instance. That's pretty to the GM who's going to describe it like, oh, it's got a big metal shell. It's going to look like maybe it's not good to use your physical attacks on it, right? So it's going to have physical resistance. But if you say this is an ice golem, it's made out of ice, oh, it stood too close to that torch and started melting and backed away, that's a good way of telegraphing to your players that that fire damage does extra damage. And so that's more satisfying to give it a fire weakness than it is to give it a ice and a cold immunity, right? So it might have cold resistance, but it'll also have fire weakness. I'm not sure if I'm getting that across right, but we're trying to do.
In fact, I think it's a more instinctive way of doing it, because even after 10 years of playing first edition, when my players would roll to identify a monster, one of the first questions they would ask is, what are its weaknesses?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, very rarely do any monsters have weaknesses in first edition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
And
now
yet,
they have a lot more weaknesses, which is satisfying because when you identify or remember a weakness, you feel rewarded as a player. You don't feel as rewarded when you're like, oh, I remember it's immune to acid, so I won't use acid. That's rewarding you for not doing something, which is not a very good reward. But when you remember something and you do it, that creates a very it's a very psychological thing when you remember, it's weak to acid. I'll use acid. Did extra damage. Boom, feeling great. Higher number, and yeah, it's a psychological response. So that's one of my favorite things. Yeah.
Perram, did you have any last questions for Patrick?
No, I'm good.
All right. So, Patrick, what can we look forward to from you in the near future?
Well, starting on Friday, I'll be participating in NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be my second time doing that. You can look forward to my blockbuster novel in 10 or 15 years when I'm sure it'll never get released. But that's a fun thing I'll be doing. Otherwise, I'll be cranking away at the Agents of Edgewatch Adventure Path, which is going to come out next Gen Con. That is the adventure path after the Extinction Curse, which Ron Lundeen is working on. So that'll be a hoot. That's Agents of Edgewatch is the first adventure path fully set in Absalom, city at the center of the world, and you are city guards for the first time in an adventure path. So I'm looking forward to seeing the response to that.
I'm already going to be queuing up my Sirenscape to get the Law and Order done on.
There you go. Yeah, gavel sound. Yeah.
Are you going to be posting your NaNoWriMo progress on, will we be able to read your novel?
Probably not. It will probably be awful. It's a first draft only, so someday maybe. But yeah, it's a whole website. If you go to nanowrimo.org, there's trackers and stuff like that. You can just punch in my name, Patrick Renee, and you'll probably find me. And I'll be posting every day my updated word count.
Luis is in chat saying that you've got some content in Lost Omens, Gods and Magic.
I do have some of that. Yep, and I did write I wrote a couple monsters for Edgewatch and a couple other things. Yeah, I'm kind of kind of got my hands all over the place. So I'm around.
If people want to find you online, where can they look?
Right here, right now. I keep a pretty.
Hello, people looking for
Hello,
Patrick.
yeah, this is me. Yeah, I keep a pretty minimal web presence. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This was a really cool interview. It did not go the direction I was expecting it to, but I think we benefited from that. We got a lot more conceptual ideas about what goes into monsters and just different ways to make monsters as someone who might want to design one. So that was really cool. I really appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Appreciate being on here. Thanks, Perram. Appreciate it.
All right. We will be right back with the news right after this.
Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news.
And we're back.
In the Pathfinder news segment, we talk about the latest happenings from Paizo for the Pathfinder role-playing game, and also stuff from third-party publishers. I don't know, I've lost this one, but whatever. People know what news is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we got surprise news this morning.
And other stuff this afternoon. Like, we got a lot of news all of a sudden, so this is going to be a news-heavy episode.
You're not prepared! It hit us all at once!
I am semi-prepared. So the first thing we're talking about is the errata, right?
Yes, we got errata.
All right, so Pathfinder 2nd Edition Core Rulebook Errata, Round 1 it's being classified as, has been released. Mm-hmm. If you were watching Pathfinder Friday, this past Friday, you got a lot of preview about the juicier things that have been errated. So I happen to watch that, which is why I'm saying that I'm more prepared than you might expect. Yeah, so we have a lot of ideas about some of the things that are changing in the first errata for the core rulebook, some of which is pretty significant, although most of it we've heard rumblings of over the last couple of months, basically since the rulebook came out. The bigger ones are the ones that it's like, wizards should not have a class feat at first level, and monks will be using wisdom as the key ability for their key magic, stuff like that.
Right. Magic Fang works now.
What did they do in the Magic Fang?
You couldn't cast it on yourself originally, and when you cast it on your animal companion, it didn't get all the full benefits because animal companions aren't allowed to have certain bonuses. So it was a spell that was basically only got full use if you cast it on another party member that wants to use natural attacks.
Yeah, all right. That was pretty specific. So, another couple of things, like a lot of things are just things that it took players accessing it, trying to do things that the rulebook says they should be able to do, and then finding out that it doesn't work that way or doesn't work at all. For example, kukris are in the gnome weapon familiarity group, but they do not have the gnome trait, and they are an uncommon weapon, which means that gnomes can use them, but they do not have access to them. So it was just a little circular thing of like, technically you're proficient in this thing that you have no access to.
Whoa, train, sorry. And like just a couple of ones that weren't called out in the live stream that our train, you're not supposed to do that to us.
Come on, train.
Train monster.
We had a
we
deal.
will stat train monster next. No, Final Fantasy did that. They have weakness to suplex.
What?
Huh?
Anyway.
So, to a couple that weren't covered in the live stream that has been talked about on our Discord chat is that druids are indeed supposed to have all 5 cantrips, not 4. And the telekinetic projectile is indeed a spell attack and not a natural attack. I know that those are 2 that were hotly contested both on the forums and our Discord. And man, this is a more extensive list of errata than I was expecting.
Well, I mean, it is the first errata for a new edition. And so there are some things that just the editors don't know to look for. So for example, a lot of the changes are like, it has the reaction symbol, or it doesn't have the reaction symbol, but it clearly is a reaction. So these are things that just, they were under the radar because how these things were being represented was still being created as it was starting to go to editing. So, a lot of it is kind of boring and nitpicky, although there's a couple of Ranger, I believe, got a whole new reaction or a whole new action. I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about this other than if you have the core rulebook, you probably want to go and check it out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are playing in a game right now, it's 6 pages of content. It's just text dense, but it's listed in order of pages. So if you know the pages that the options your characters are using, then just go and reference to see if it has changed.
And I do have to say that this is a much better presented PDF of errata than we have seen from Paizo before. I've often had complaints that the nature of the errata documents that they would release were basically indecipherable, whereas this is much easier to read and understand. And honestly, I would, as somebody as dedicated to Pathfinder as myself, how I would understand the errata documents in the past would be I would open them, I would read them, I would then find the forum thread explaining them, because I did not want to sit there and cross-reference every single book page by page, making the language substitutions of the words in order to understand what it meant. Whereas this document is pretty, in most cases, pretty understandable just by looking at them. I also kind of like, and this is me poking a little bit of fun at the team, but this is fun poke with love. The section on page 5 at the bottom, which I am deeming the coming in hot section, which is just, we forgot to change these words from the playtest to their new words, and it's just like a list of like 40 options, and it's just like, oh, there you go.
Yeah, I know they were talking on the stream about how some armor is classified as noisy, but there are no rules for what noisy armor is, so you can still be walking around stealthing in noisy armor. And so that was called out as something that's like, we should probably have rules for that. I mentioned earlier it was the ranger that got a new ability. That was wrong. It's the alchemist. The alchemist gets mutagenic flashback, which it's being thought of as the regurgitate mutagen option, where mutagen you drank earlier, you can get a little flashback, a little recall of that mutagen and regain the benefit of a previous mutagen you've drank earlier today. So that is like a whole new option that has been added to the alchemist to replace something that basically was a redundant option. It was something that it allowed you to do something you could do anyway. Also, one thing I appreciate from the Pathfinder Friday is that not everything that's on their to-do list is on there. Perram, speaking of to-do list, I just looked at Twitch and our framing is totally off. We're still in the 3-person frame. Anyway, so
yeah,
if it's on the to-do list and they haven't decided what to do yet, then they're not going to cover it. They're not going to give a snap answer for something that requires a lot more thought. And that is definitely something that caused a lot of confusion in first edition errata. Probably the most famous example was when there was problems with how many shots a gunslinger could get using the right combination of options. And so a designer just said, fine, you can only have like 5 free actions on your turn. And it was suddenly like, but drawing an arrow is a free action. Like, am I not allowed to draw more than 5 arrows? And it was a pretty flippant answer. No, not flippant, but it was like it was a from the hip answer that caused far more problems than it solved.
yeah.
So it's better. I prefer the idea that they're going to take a step back. If it's something that needs a little more percolating, they're going to let it percolate.
Right. I mean, I kind of want to balance between those two. Like, I like when there are just like unofficial, hey, this is kind of game breaking. We need to know a quick answer to this specific bit of rules now. But for anything in depth, I do enjoy what they've done here better. There are situations where like you need like they had to come out and tell us which of the 2 death and dying rules were real, especially for organized plays, because there are in the core rulebook there are 2 versions of death and dying rules, and they handle completely differently, and to massive amounts of changes at a Pathfinder Society table, especially the day the game released, when a whole bunch of us were scratching our heads going, which one, which? Thankfully, a few of us had the ability to just send people to ask John Kempton directly, and that helped a lot at Gen Con, but not everybody has regular access to John Kempton.
So you're talking about when you come back, are you reduced to 0 HP or reduced to 1 HP?
Right. Well, one reduced to 0 HP and cleared some conditions, and the other came back at 1 HP but didn't clear any conditions.
Okay.
And so it was very confusing. And they fixed it.
I'll-
It's 0. It's 0 HP. You don't become awake. You're still unconscious.
One other thing that I appreciated was that we heard regularly for the last couple of weeks that it is probably coming out today. Like this was the projected date,
Mhm.
but they were constantly saying it non-committally. They were saying, we're going to try and get it out this date. And so like, that's just nice to know as somebody who wants that information that this is a day I might get it, but I'm not, marking it on my calendar. And then, hey, they hit the target, which is
Mhm.
really nice. They weren't just saying it non-committally because they knew they weren't actually going to hit it. They said it non-committally, but they did manage to get to that commitment.
And, and I think this answered most of the urgent nagging questions about second edition. I'm not seeing a whole lot of people out there still concerned or confused about the rules. This pretty much clears up all the major controversies I'm aware of.
Yeah, Luis in chat is saying that they feel more akin to patch notes than the old errata notes.
That's a fair point, and I had often complained that I wanted to read an errata thing like a Blizzard patch notes list. So exactly, Luis, you are correct, sir.
Another thing that was posted today, I am surprised these two things came out on the same day. It's a blog post called "Pulling Back the Curtain on Organized Play Outstanding Tasks." And it goes into the philosophy of sanctioning content, specifically adventure content for Pathfinder Society. And it's very earnest. It's saying we have sanctioned Fall of Plaguestone. That is the only adventure we've sanctioned so far for second edition, other than the Pathfinder Society adventures. And we are learning. We now are getting feedback on things, the way we've sanctioned things, our philosophy for sanctioning, and we are going to make changes slowly and properly. This is a blog post by Tanya today.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't give us a lot of information about specifics of this philosophy, only that the reason that things are going at the pace they're going at is because, once something is sanctioned, it's a lot harder to unsanction it than it is to put it off until, once again, like we were saying, percolating, getting it right instead of getting it out on a certain time.
This is where I'm going to be a jerk.
Ah!
I agree that it needs to be right, and I understand why they're taking their time, because doing it wrong would be catastrophic and hurt the community as a whole. That said, there's such a thing as too slow. And we're not there yet, but for first edition, it was taking sometimes way too long to get something sanctioned after it was released because of just backlog. And, this is work. This is a ton of work. But at the same time, this is also a huge community that's depending on this content, that wants to be able to use this content, and to have it not be available before the next AP comes out would be bad. This is a little bit less in that they seem to be allowing people to go back. Like if you had played Plaguestone, they've explicitly said that you can still get credit for that. Whereas in first edition, when the APs were first getting sanctioned, if you had played them before the sanction document came out, you weren't allowed to take credit for that. Where at least now you can backdate sanctioning. That will make this a lot easier, and I really support that decision. And this would be catastrophic without that decision, because book 4 of Age of Ashes came out, and it's not sanctioned yet.
Like book 1's not sanctioned yet, you mean?
Right.
Well, on top of that, the World Guide's not sanctioned yet. Like a lot of the further options beyond the core rulebook are not sanctioned.
And part of the purpose of Society is a promotion tool for the game, to encourage people to buy new content and promote the game. And when you can't use content that they've promoted and put out and really pushed and you're excited about, for a very long time after purchasing it, that's a bad thing. So I'm sympathetic that they need to get this right. They also need to hurry. I should not be the book should be sanctioned before the next book comes out.
Now, every time we've reviewed one of the hardcovers, the joke has been it's finally here, because these are things that we've been hearing about for a long time. But these hardcovers have come out really fast. So yeah, the World Guide should probably have been sanctioned by now, because that really was the first expansion to the rules. The fact that the Character Guide is not sanctioned yet and might not be before the Gods of Magic comes out.
Right.
I am
this
still
character
fairly
came
forgiving
out
because
a week
the
ago.
game came out in August. It's only October.
Right.
Also, I meant somebody in our Discord made the joke that I was going to say it's finally here talking about the errata, and I took a note to make that joke, and I ignored the note, and I feel bad now.
I'm going to be a little bit more of a jerk.
Jeez, all right.
Yeah, and I'm sympathetic to the team. I know they're understaffed and overworked. Okay, but this is where I think that Paizo should put more resources to support the team to accomplish the goal, not blaming individual team members here. But the book came out for the public 2 weeks ago. It went to the printer months before that. I mean, we've had character guide as reviewers in advance of that. So it's not that the book came out to the organized play team should have been able to see this book the second it went to the printers, and that is a big chunk of months to do things. And I understand that there's always going to be things, but they can probably they should try to move their date backwards towards when they get access. You get what I'm saying? Like if it's taking this
it's
much
true.
time,
I was thinking of
shift
release
back
date, but you're right. The printer date.
Yeah, they don't have to go get the book from the FLGS. They can pull it from the server.
F3 Cubed has an interesting question in chat. You might have some insight on. Are 5e adventures sanctioned on AL? Actually, it's an interesting question that I don't fully understand.
Adventure League. I do not know Adventure League details. That I mean, my experience with 5e is not that detailed, I'm afraid. I do know that our local Adventure League has abandoned Adventure League rules because they are not enjoying it. And those same players are playing in my Pathfinder Society groups and loving Pathfinder Society rules, even though they prefer 5e the game. They prefer PFS, the Organized Play Foundation, because PFS and especially SFS are awesome.
There you go. That's a positive note to end on.
Oh, yeah.
More positivity, I expect from you. Pathfinder Crit Arena was announced also today?
And airs tomorrow? Or is it Friday?
Nope, Friday.
Friday? Okay. Well, depending on when you're listening to this, that's a true statement, because it's technically probably going to get released to the podcast stream past midnight.
So Pathfinder Crit Arena is just a fun, interactive game that Paizo is playing on their official Twitch channel on Friday, November 1st from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific, which is 7 p.m. Eastern. It's totally a promotional tool. They're promoting 3 products: the Critical Hits, Critical Fumble, and Bestiary Battle Cards decks. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that they are, it is Liz Lydell and Adam Daigle. They will be acting as hosts for battles where monsters are taking on the iconics from the core rulebook. So the featured characters for each of the classes, they will be fighting various monsters. These monsters will be decided by the people in chat and then will be played using the monster battle cards. And the reason it is called Crit Arena is because every hit is a critical hit, every miss is a critical fumble. And they'll be randomly drawing crit hit and crit fumble cards from their respective decks to see just what happens to the combatants.
Oh boy, that's going to be wild and very short fights.
Yes, and boy, logistically, I'm curious just how many fights we're going to go through. Like, you could go through 12 iconics in 12 rounds, theoretically. Mm-hmm. So that will be preceded by a Legendary Adventures Pathfinder Battles unboxing with Eric Mona and Mark Moreland. They're going to be unboxing I believe a case.
Wow.
Let me see if it says just how many of these new miniatures they're going to be unboxing. No, it just says an unboxing, unless I'm missing it. So that is going to start at 2:30 p.m. Pacific, which is 5:30 Eastern.
A brick. My guess is a brick.
My guess is they didn't say how many, just so that they can bail if it gets boring early, or they can keep going if there's a lot of interest. Malleability through vagary. I like this. I really like the idea of promoting products by just showing people having fun with them, but also giving them a chance to go into specific details about them, interacting with the audience. So, if a crit card comes out that's interesting, they can pause what they're doing to really talk about it, to answer any questions that are coming up. I hope to see more of this stuff. This, like, Paizo has had a minor online presence for so long, and then suddenly really started picking up different ways that they could be reacting to the audience, and really making the Twitch channel a featured aspect of their promotion. And so having something like this, which, like, they created a whole logo just for the Crit Arena, so it's possibly something we're going to go back to in the future. Putting a little bit more thought and planning into these ways to promote their products, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely great. Just having some more fun with it. So I'm enjoying it and having fun watching it. Also, a little bit of news. The Knights of the Everflame Season 2, which we were surprised was coming out so fast after Season 1, premiered yesterday. So if you want to watch it, I think it's a week delay of premium on Geek and Sundry, and then it'll hit the public YouTubes next week. So a week from yesterday, you'll be able to watch it if you're not subscribed to Geek and Sundry. And if you are subscribed, I think, is this one you can watch on VRV? And the VRV Geek and Sundry marriage,
What
I'm
is
not
VRV?
sure. Crunchyroll teamed up with Crunchyroll teamed up with Funimation to form a joint streaming service that teamed up with Geek and Sundry and Hanna-Barbera and a whole bunch of awesome content creators out there to make one subscription. Like, it's like $10 a month, and you get access to this gigantic library of streaming stuff. And then Funimation pulled out because Sony bought Funimation and didn't want to play nice with Crunchyroll anymore. So they pulled out and took their ball and went home. But then High Dive came in and replaced them, and High Dive is another great anime service that mostly focuses on old classics and getting them licensed over here. So you get Legend of the Galactic Heroes and a bunch of really cool classics that also have English. So the difference is Funimation does English voices and Crunchyroll does English subtitles, and that matters a lot for different members of the audiences.
Subs v dubs.
Yep. And so High Dive has come in to be the dubs part of that, to replace Funimation, and they also partnered with Geek and Sundry, so I was able to watch like Relic and Reliquaries, which was a D&D 5e actual play that was kind of cool, and a bunch of various other Geek and Sundry shows are on there. So I do not know if Knights of the Everflame is part of that package, but I do know it is part of Geek and Sundry's subscription. It gets confusing. But hey.
Here's a question.
Cool.
Do we need to summarize what Knights of Everflame is? Remind people?
Knights of the Everflame is a not Dungeons and Dragons. There's too many D&D actual plays out there. And Geek and Sundry used to do a bunch of them. But there are... Knights of the Everflame is a Pathfinder 2e actual play done in conjunction with Geek and Sundry, with Jason Bowman as the GM, and it is produced original adventures. It's not running through any AP, and they've got a fantastic cast, a good set, redonkulously high production values, as you would expect from something coming from Geek and Sundry.
And I'm just going to make a minor correction. It is Knights of Everflame. It's not the Everflame.
My bad.
So, like you said, it comes out on the YouTube channel a week after it airs on the Geek and Sundry's paywalled service. So right now, the first season is up there, which is, I believe it's 8 episodes, because there's also other videos where they're interviewing the cast and whatnot. Okay. It's 8 episodes. They are 3 hours each. I just looking at my bar am 2 hours into episode 1, and unfortunately I never was able to go back. I really wish this was released as a podcast, because production value and all is great, but I listen to way more podcasts than I watch long form videos on YouTube, which is unfortunate. I really enjoyed the 2 hours that I did watch. It was just not something that, just with my viewing habits, I was likely to go back to.
Right.
But I am happy that it's popular enough that it got a season 2 greenlight right away, and that they already went into it.
The hack there is to use the YouTube Music app and then queue them up as songs.
I do know that hack. I
It's
have
not
enough
easy. It's
podcasts.
having to do another
Like,
step.
it is a hoop that I know how to jump through
Mhm.
and would probably enjoy the benefits of jumping through it. It's just, as I'm looking at the hoop, getting ready to make the jump, I'm just like, I'll just listen to something that I've already got on my subscription box, which I'm going to mention a little bit more detail when I get to the shoutouts, because I do listen to a lot of great podcasts and I feel like I should talk about them more often.
Mhm.
All right, 2 more pieces of news. Game Mastery Guide pushed back again.
Again.
Yes, it is now officially pre-orders expected in February of 2020. Last we heard was January, and original announcement was, I believe, November for this book.
Yeah, the PaizoCon date was November.
I don't think we've gotten any details on why this book keeps getting pushed back. I don't know if it's something that needs further development, if there's just specific feedback from the core rulebook that is being applied and therefore it's being delayed for its own sake, or maybe it's because there is so much product coming out that the decision was made to put back Game Mastery Guide, since the first edition Game Mastery Guide is not a particularly well remembered book. I think that this fills a different niche for second edition than the first edition one did for first edition, and I am much more excited for this one than I ever was for the first edition book, because the first edition core rulebook covered all the game mastering that I needed.
I mean, so we've already seen that they're going to have dual class, which looks like Gestalt roles. They've previewed that as going to be in the Game Mastery Guide. This looks like it's what we would call an Unearthed Arcana book, or for Pathfinder fans, a Unchained style book, more than just...
I would say more Ultimate Campaign than Unchained. It gives subsystems and some variants, but not... It's not as Unchained as Unchained.
No, but it's giving a ton of variant systems, more than Game Mastery Guide 1.0 did. It's really similar to the DMG2 of 3.5 and 4th edition.
I would say it's half that and half GMG1, because it's talking about there's going to be relics, which is, it's calling it a variant magic item system, but it's really just another set of magic items, like a new type of magic item. It's got subsystems about hexploring sandbox style, universal victory point system to help you design your own subsystems. So it's stuff that is core and fundamental to designing your campaign, as well as other things for customizing your campaign to your preferences.
It's also going to have magic item list rules, as well as how to run the game without proficiency bonuses. So that's a fundamental change to the core math of the game.
And like the Game Mastery Guide first edition, it's going to have a whole bunch of NPCs in the back, which again is going to be super valuable, because we don't have the NPC creation rules, or at least we didn't until the PDF preview when that came out. Like, the game is not done until the Game Mastery Guide comes out.
Right.
Like, after that, new options are added, but this is still core to the engine of how second edition works.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of stuff in there, especially as someone who doesn't run canned adventures, that I just feel a little without a net at the moment.
Now, pre-written adventures, Ryan, not canned.
If I don't think there's anything pejorative about canned.
Oh, well, you got onto me for crunch, fluff.
No, crunch and flavor.
Right.
Flavor versus fluff. Fluff feels a little arbitrary and meaningless, whereas flavor and crunch relate to each other a little better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all right. Published adventures or pre-written adventures.
Now,
like
what
you're
was
opening a can of adventure.
Now, what is our final news item?
Oh, well, this is something that I don't even know if it would have been worth talking about if I hadn't seen so much Paizo staff promoting this fact. Paizo now has an Amazon store. It is a dedicated page on Amazon. If you go to amazon.com/Paizo, then you will get a nicely formatted just page that lists all of the Paizo products that you can buy. It's divided up into Pathfinder RPG, PF2 apparel, adventures, Starfinder. It's nice. It's another way that you can buy your products, especially if you are already one to use Amazon, which I've learned can be very slow getting Paizo products for some reason.
Yeah,
like,
that's
some of the
surprised.
slowest turnaround I've had on Amazon orders is from Paizo products. Just a fact. I don't know if having this product page will speed that up, or if it's just a reality of the relationship between Paizo and Amazon. Not the relationship, but like the logistics of how Amazon gets its orders from and to Paizo.
Oh dear. Some of this
Oh dear.
is there. Some of this is Paizo's own products, and some of this is stuff they've published being sold by speculative sellers. Oh my.
Is there okay? You need to define what you've just talked about and why you're saying "oh my."
Okay, so when I thought that this was Paizo store, it meant that I thought that only Paizo sourcing this to Amazon would be the ones to show up. But for example, I've pulled up the Pathfinder Battles White Dragon Evolution box set, which originally retailed for, I'm thinking, $40. And it came with 3 white dragons. But now, because Amazon allows speculative sellers to sell on the market, it is listing it as the price of $190, as if on the Paizo branded store, which if you did not know the details that I just told you, and it sounded like for a second there you didn't, you would think that Paizo was pumping their own price up.
What's interesting to me is that I can't get that same page to come up on the Amazon store. So what was your exact path to it?
Amazon/store/Paizo publishing.
Hold on. Let me go back to my link.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe it's something I did wrong there, but just pulling up the
because I just went to amazon.com/Paizo.
Okay, I'll go to /Paizo and see if that changes things.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
a very
scrolling
different
through
store.
And I'm not seeing that kind of product here.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, no, and this is a much more customized and built store. Okay, yeah, so this is what you should have seen.
Okay.
Which is much better. Well, that's good. That's great. I'm glad it exists. And I'm glad it's not gonna do that.
Something that I'm gonna explore is this apparel section, because maybe I'm just not up on who has the t-shirt license right now, but I did not expect there to be so much Pathfinder apparel that it becomes the second section of the Paizo store.
Yeah, Off-World Designs, I believe, is the current license holder for that. And
I remember Off-World having it a while ago, but the only thing I ever remember seeing from them was the Pathfinder logo on a t-shirt.
No,
I
they
really
did
like
all the
this
character shirts.
Fumbus
Yeah, these
monochrome t-shirt.
Yeah, these look like they're Off-World. This looks like the Off-World shirts that I remember.
Okay, then there was more done with Off-World stuff than I realized.
I might be wrong. This isn't saying Off-World straight away, but that is my belief on who currently has that license. Yeah, but there's some great looking shirts. I bought like most of the Off-World design shirts to give away as Christmas presents at Gen Con. It's a cheap, easy Gen Con Christmas gift. So this actually, there's actually a lot to digest here, besides the fact that Paizo did this, and that is the meta conversation around Paizo opening an Amazon store, which, as someone who listens to a lot of FLGS owners, they already don't like Amazon for obvious reasons. Paizo and having their own store and their own subscription option is already something that makes them grumpy. This
I've heard more complaints. Well, actually, I've heard a lot of complaints about Paizo with incentivizing the subscribers by having PDFs and whatnot, which is why Paizo has then other incentive programs for PFS to support the friendly local gaming stores, because it really does feel like the ideal model from Paizo's point of view is you get your books, you get your subscriptions from them, and then make sure that when you go to the game stores, you are also buying stuff there.
And gosh, now my players are really good about that, and my store works really nicely with us, and they give our players discounts on Pathfinder stuff when they show up for Pathfinder Day. But it's also a reality in the States that it's becoming harder and harder to be a small business, period. And it's being very hard to be a small business in the nerd space lately because of current moves in the comic book industry and Wizards of the Coast have quit giving preferential treatment to game stores, and they've quit having listed pricing, retail pricing for their products. which what it means is that without a actual stated retail price, the speculative price then becomes the real price. And so the stores used to at least have the defense on their side of, well, they're charging retail. They're not jacking the price up because this is the price that's on the back of the sticker on the product itself. And all these changes and a lot of the changes with Diamond and a lot of the changes with the comic book industry means that being a friendly local gaming store, at least down here in the States, I don't know how different that will be up there in the greater north of Canada, but it's becoming much harder. It's becoming more hostile, and you can't count on what you would used to be considered your partners. And a move like this is going to be added to the long list of grievances from FLGS owners. And a lot of that's just going to be the economy and the fact that the internet exists and makes things harder for small local businesses and stores to work in the first place. And if you ask me, even with my biases, there's very little objective reason to buy something from an FLGS logically, other than sentimentality, or you play there regularly and want that play space to exist. And for a store that doesn't even have a play space, that becomes an even harder justification. So again, going back to what I've always said, that actual play space in your stores is vital for your store to have a reason to exist if you're a friendly local gaming store out there. But gosh, I'm just seeing the crash coming, and it is not a fun thing to watch.
Now, what about the Wizards Play Network? Isn't that something that's being made more retailer friendly local gaming store friendly?
That is something that they're doing to ease the wound, but they're giving you they're making the Play Network useful, but they've kind of kneecapped it along the way, especially since they started outsourcing their organized play stuff to independent companies instead of doing it themselves. And these changes to the pricing and distribution rules for their product have a much more concrete meaning than some promotion of what you can do on Friday nights with Magic. I mean, the changes to the Magic pricing alone is going to basically force retailers to cut the prices, and then also the profit margins are going down on those products in the beginning to begin with, and they don't have retail incentive packs anymore, and they don't have any advanced release window anymore. It's just all bad news. What WotC's doing is not helping the stores at all. In fact, they seem to be helping Amazon's and the big box stores a lot more than they are doing anything for the small local stores. Whereas used to, stores could count on having a week or two advantage on release, having there used to be a difference between a Magic pack that you bought in a big box store and the Magic pack you would buy at a hobby store. Significant differences that would mean that the hobby store version was the preferred version to buy because the randomization was better. Not the distribution, but the randomization. It gets into the weeds when I'm starting to describe this, but it's stuff that high-end collectors dropping hundreds of dollars on this stuff care about, and drove traffic to these stores where they could then play the game and the game would be evangelized. You can't go into a Walmart and play Magic. And also, by encouraging the actual play stuff, but discouraging the sales, what they're doing is forcing stores to host play for their games, but not get the benefit of sales for those games. So they're encouraging people to buy at Walmart and then use up the store's resources to play there on Friday.
So then, this Amazon store.
Yeah.
More significant than I was realizing.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully friendly local gaming stores are able to actually, you know what? I remember reading an ICV2 article recently that was in line with what you're saying, but from the comic side, where it was talking about even if you've got like you can be too invested in your most profitable item and still not it could be damaging. It was a really depressing read where it was just talking about if you have too much of the monthly publication stuff, that can be bad for you, even though that's what you think of as a comic book store.
Right.
And so basically every comic store, every gaming store has to be another kind of store that offers gaming or comic material. Something else has to be the foundation of your business.
Right. And like if you're a comic book store right now, what you need to have is a near complete library of trade paperbacks, more so, and you do want the monthly sales still, but you want to be making most of your money on trade paperbacks. You want to have a decent board game collection. If you're going to stock a product like D&D or Pathfinder or miniatures games, you have to stock deep. You can't just grab the high. You can't just survive on core rulebooks. Even though you're going to sell core rulebooks as your primary product, it doesn't matter because if they come to your store once and they can't find the new release because your store didn't carry the new release, then the next time that the next release comes out, they're going to go somewhere else because that's where they're going to find it. So even though
Thunder Lily is in chat saying that her game store hasn't picked up Lost Omens character guide yet, and that while they have all the all the 5e books, they only have core rule books for PF2.
Some of that is the Lost Omens books were in much more demand than they accomplished for, and that a lot of that demand came in after the order date. So a lot of game stores that realized PF2 was going to be the success it became tried to order Lost Omens books after the printing order had gone out for Lost Omens books. Therefore, there weren't enough for stores to get. So the original orders went through. A lot of those were pre-orders or special orders for customers. Then the original copies on the shelves would have been gobbled up beyond that. And if your store didn't anticipate that PF2 was going to be as successful as it was, you're going to be waiting for second printings of those books. So that would be a reason why your store would have core rulebooks of PF2, because they printed those in abundance, and Lost Omens was not printed as aggressively. And we do know that those sold through and are on second printings. Well, they didn't order any extra Thunder Lily, and now they can't because there's none available because they've all been sold. So even if they wanted to get some now, after there's a demand for it, they can't because all they printed X number, they entered the distribution chain. The distribution chain is now empty for those books. They can't get them. Now I don't know if that for your particular store bias, they might not be supporting PF2 for lots of reasons, including this Amazon decision or the subscription decision, or lots of reasons that stores, local gaming stores, have legitimate reason to not want to support PF2 and support 5e more.
Well, on that note, I usually like ending on a more positive note.
Yeah, sorry.
Anyway, we've got, so I've got some things that are in the shout out section that will almost be like mini banter. So it'll be a robust shout out section that will be especially positive. So I think we are ready to move on to the shout outs.
All right.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shout-outs.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 211 of No Direction Podcast, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Thank you once again to our guest, Patrick Renee, rhymes with Genie. That was a really fun interview. And like I said, it was not where I was expecting it to go. And so the first thing I'm going to shout out to was actually a tool that I expected to be a significant part of this episode. And that is Kamuhara's Monster Checklist. So this is a Google Doc, a very pretty Google Doc. I appreciate a well put together
You found a
spreadsheet.
different one.
What's that?
We have different ones.
Do we? What do you have?
I have Gender Witch's Google spreadsheet.
Is it not as pretty? Because that seems to be what tipped you off.
Well, it's not. I wouldn't call it very pretty.
Okay.
I would call it functional and easy
Oh,
to
yeah.
use.
No, mine's way prettier than that.
Yeah. I need your link. Give me your link.
It's in the show notes. Did you not get the link to the show notes?
No, I don't have the link to the show notes. Sorry.
All right.
So I will grab
Then,
that while you do that. Tell us why yours is awesome.
Oh, because it's got a nice section on the right-hand side where you are modifying the stats and the crunch, and then it spits out automatically on the left-hand side with the changes you've made to the monster. So it's very easy to do the more boring part of monster creation, the fiddling with stats and just like making sure that you've got, all of your saving throws accounted for, whatnot. I mostly like it for the prettiness. It really does churn out a really nice character sheet.
Wonderful.
How's the functionality of yours?
It's I was going to use it when we originally, the plan for this episode was we were going to make a monster, and so I was going to use it to make a monster. It's real darn easy to use. It doesn't make a pretty stat block or anything, but it was I was able to make a few monsters using it as prep for the episode.
All right, here's my proposal.
Mm-hmm.
We take that flesh monster that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We have dueling stat block generators. So I will make it, not right now, but for a blog post. I will make mine. You will make your version of it. Just what we've talked about is the only thing we will talk about. So what's talked about that creature on the air is the only thing you have to base it on. So if you fill out abilities and whatnot, that's just creative decisions you're making and I'm making along the way. And then we'll just compare our monsters and just see how similar they ended up. Mm-hmm. And
Fair
also
enough.
we'll talk about our experiences with the different tools.
Also, I do like that there are multiples. I know that these aren't even the only two out there. One of the things I really enjoy about the Pathfinder 2 release is all the cool rush of fan tools that are making it out into the world, various different player resources. It's like when PF1 came out and all of the enthusiasm and all the cool tools that were coming out then, and Pathfinder database and GM shared prep and all the really awesome stuff. It's a renaissance. We're getting to do it again, everybody.
Yeah, that was a great time because in the 3.5 days, it felt like any internet site that came up that wasn't owned by Wizards of the Coast would get its hand swatted by Wizards of the Coast saying like, no, you are not able to do this. The hypertext D20 PFSR, or sorry, hypertext D20 SRD being one of the only exceptions because that one followed a legal document that was printed at the back of the book. Mm-hmm. And Wizards of the Coast even seemed to be upset that was a thing that was allowed by the OGL. It seemed like this is a tool that is completely out of our control and was not our intention. And there was revolutionized how 3.5 went. And then Pathfinder tools being encouraged by Paizo and the community use license coming out just changed the game and made it much more fan-friendly and interactive. Like one of the reasons so many people bought into Pathfinder was because of how community-based it was to get into Pathfinder.
I mean, it was this, and it was the D20 PFSRD, not D20 PFSRD, the D20SRD.org, and I forget the company that released them, but there was basically the pocket manuals for each of the 3 books. There was a pocket DMG, a pocket PHB, and a pocket monster manual that technically followed the rules of the OGL to basically release the 3 core rule books as printed documents that a lot of game stores had because they were smaller and paperback back when the alternative was big. And we have extolled the virtues of the pocket editions of the core rule books in bestiaries before, so you can see why they'd be popular, and you can see why a Wizards of the Coast at the time would not like that existed. And one of the key motivators for the gutting of the OGL that was 4th edition.
And we all know how that turned out. Oh, actually, I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I also want to give a shout out to Hazel, who is a new member of our Discord, who came on and almost immediately went into our looking for group section, looking for game section, which doesn't get a whole lot of play, but they announced that they were looking for players for a Weeby Goblins conversion to 2nd edition play-by-post. And Randall, one of our bloggers, so another No Direction staff member, both joined in on the game. Now, Hazel came to us through Reddit, looking for a Pathfinder 2nd edition Discord chat. So I don't think they are even aware of the podcast or that 2 staff members are in their game. But it's been a lot of fun so far, and we are even just in the prep phase of the Weeby Goblins conversion. So originally it was just going to be Weeby Goblins, and then they decided, what if we started with We Before We Before Goblins Part 4, which is a prequel to We Be Goblins. And so they started converting that, and that's our starting point. And I've never played or read that one. I think it's in a box right now. I believe I own a copy, but I have never cracked that spine. So that's exciting. I get to start a new Goblin adventure in a new like revisiting something that could have been familiar, but now from a much newer and fresher perspective. Plus, it's play by post, which is something I've wanted to do for a while, but I've never had the. Well, I've had the opportunity. I've just never taken that plunge. And Weepy Goblins is such a low impact, low expectations way to get into it. Like, you can't be bad in Weepy Goblins. It's just, if your character is screwing up, if you build your character wrong, that's just part of the fun. And so already in just like the prep for it, we've been making exchanges in character. And one of Hazel's other ideas is that if we wanted to customize backgrounds, we tell the story of the goblins we're playing, because we're not going to be playing the iconic goblins. And then Hazel produced a personalized backstory. So I came up with a character that almost drowned, and so has now sworn vengeance upon all water. And they made me a background called Pond Slayer. And I actually do get underwater combat, because even though it sounds like it should be just making you very good at fighting in water, it actually also, the benefits you get from it are very good if you are fighting against water. So I have no idea how this is going to play up. That was just a very off the cuff improvisation when I was trying to come up with a character, and I realized I didn't have to play one of the iconic goblins, but it's definitely made this one of my more memorable characters already. So this is something I don't know if there is like an audience option for the Discord server that Hazel set up for this game. I am going to bring this up tomorrow and see, because we have just started the game. We've just all sat down in Licktoad Village and are being talked to by an important NPC. So if people want to sit in and observe this, I'm going to see if that's an option that all the other players on our GM are comfortable with, because I have a feeling this is going to be a lot of fun.
I can set up a channel in the Discord that only lets a certain group of people post, but everybody read.
Okay, then I might have to consult with you if if everyone is on board but nobody knows how to do it. I will talk to you.
Roger.
And I want to give a shout out to today's blog post. It is by James, even though James's normal day right now is Thursday. Because tomorrow is Halloween, we made some special arrangements. Alex is going to be posting an iconic design tomorrow that is Halloween themed, and we'll have original art by Alan Cooper that I am very excited for people to see.
Mm-hmm.
So James, once again, Randall requested James to go into the science of dark vision, and James went above and beyond figuring out how to make dark vision work realistically, because vision is based on light going into an eye. So how would dark vision work? What are the real world examples? What are some more fantasy world ways that theoretically could be possible?
Man.
I think James, I don't know if James gets enough credit for just how smart his blog is.
It is crazy good quality. I mean, it's amazing. And part of me like extols that he doesn't produce more gaming material. James pretty much, like, his gaming output is pretty much just our blog posts that are fantastic, and more people need to know they exist. They are brilliant.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that he put more effort into this one than most. He was kind of hassling Randall about all the extra effort he went into it, but it shows. And like, he's also a fun writer. So if you have not checked out Code Switch, or you haven't read it in a while, check out What Do Dwarf Eyes See, the October 30th edition of Code Switch, and just marvel at what James puts out there, when the rest of us are just, making Weird Al references in our game mastery blogs. So that is it for my not podcast related shoutouts. Perram, did you have any shoutouts before I move on to the next category of shoutouts I want to get into?
I want to shout out to a Facebook group. It is called the Tabletop Crafters Group. You can find it on Facebook. It is like a private group that anybody can join. And a lot of it has been sort of, if you remember like some YouTube channels like DM Scotty or I forget all their names now, but there's a lot of really good YouTube channels about how to do very cool tabletop crafting using foam and toilet paper and cardboard and making your own props and dungeon tiles and really sweet thing. Yeah, Black Magic Craft is huge. Is a huge part of this.
It's Tabletop Crafters Guild, right? I just want to make sure I
Tabletop
the right
Crafters
link.
Guild. Sorry, and it is just browsing through that, you will get some of the most amazing inspiration for your games. And then it was like, and I made this out of a toilet paper roll and 4 rocks from my village and a plastic fish from a McDonald's toy. And it will look like the most amazing piece of terrain that any table has ever seen. And then you'll get to see how they made it. And it's just
Can I just
awesome.
talk about this one piece that's up here?
Which one? Let me.
Joe Holohan made a table out of vampire teeth. Like at first I thought when he said it's a vampire teeth table that this was supposed to actually be a vampire's teeth, but no, he took like the Halloween costume plastic teeth, flattened them out, put just a little piece of styrofoam on top of it, and painted the whole thing with like a stone texture.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks amazing, and it looks so simple. I believe I could do that tonight if I wanted to. I don't have any vampire teeth. By tomorrow, I could get that thing done. And it is just so smart, well executed.
Right. And
yeah,
that
this is a great group to belong
yeah,
to.
and this is this whole group. It is all sorts of cool stuff. Like you'll be amazed what they do with toothpicks and Q-tips. And a glue gun. A glue gun is required. Go buy a glue gun. They're cheap.
I have a glue gun. It's waiting to be heated up for my Halloween costume. Any other shout-outs?
Nope, that's all I wanted to shout out. But you know where you can find out more awesome stuff from No Direction, don't you, Ryan?
I do. You don't want to save this until after my second round of shout-outs?
You've got more shout-outs? Okay.
Yeah, I said I've got a bunch of podcasts that I want to shout out to.
Sorry, my bad.
That's all right. All right. So first of all, I was on the Dice Geeks podcast, which it is the name of this podcast is a little vague because it's for dicegeeks.com and the logo has Tabletop RPG Show on it. But whether it's the dicegeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show, whether it's the Tabletop RPG Show by dicegeeks.com, anyway, it's a fun show where the host, whose name I can look up very quickly, but he's talking to it's Matt something. Anyway, Matt talks to different people about crafting a story and how how storytelling is different across different genres. In the first episode, he talks to Harryhausen's apprentice, which is super cool. Harryhausen is in the stop motion animator that revolutionized how special effects work in Hollywood, which was a great get for him because by the 7th episode he's talking to me. So I was on an episode, and he is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition player with very little Pathfinder experience. So it's actually a very Pathfinder history and community, and just like he just wanted to know what Pathfinder was like. So most of the episode is talking about it. It's was a fun opportunity to go through the history of Pathfinder since we were there. Like No Direction tomorrow is celebrating its 12th anniversary, and our first Paizo interview were before Pathfinder First Edition's core rulebook came out, because we've just happened to be there in the right place at the right time, and we've built this whole thing around that. Which, by the way, start watching the Facebook page for our new what am I calling it? Pathfinder, which is like a Throwback Thursday post. So tomorrow I'm going to be sharing the first episode of Private Sanctuary, which launched 12 years ago today. So it was just a fun opportunity to talk about Pathfinder. A lot of the stuff, if people have been listening to us for a long time, you'll have heard on this podcast, but never in one concentrated chunk like this. So if you're looking for a new podcast that's about storytelling and about the craft of GMing and playing the game, I recommend you could start with my episode, or I definitely recommend you start with one of the first couple of episodes. And keep an eye out, because after the interview was done, I recommended some other people that I thought would make good guests for his show. So it's a podcast that I downloaded the first couple of episodes because I knew I was going to be on it, and I have listened to every episode that they've released to date. It's a good show. It's not just a good show because I was on it. So I also want to make a habit of just talking about the different things that are in my podcatcher. and I'm going to try and shout out to just a show every episode that I believe people should be checking out. One of them right now I'm in love with is The Illusionist. Illusionist, as in alluding to things. It is all about word
Oh.
history. And let me set this up for you. The first episode is about how much the host does not like puns, and I still love this show. And my favorite episode was about Mount Weasel, which is a word for words that were added to the dictionary for copyright purposes. Basically, if I am publishing a dictionary, I might add words that are not real words just so that if they show up in another dictionary, I know somebody has just copied my dictionary. They are like fake words just used to catch people infringing on my words. It is fascinating.
So the paper towns thing, then, but for words.
Paper down, like the fake streets that cartographers will add to maps
Yes.
to know if somebody, yeah, exactly, but for words. But the thing is, you can't just draw an extra line like you would if you're drawing a fake street. You have to make up a fake definition and like make it seem like a plausible word. And it was the most interesting thing that I have learned in a while. And I've been listening to some really smart podcasts lately, so I've been learning a lot of things. But that Illusionist episode made me excited. And I am like, people should know that I'm a word nerd. And The Illusionist is definitely the podcast for people that are word nerds. And they're like 15, 20-minute episodes. So it's great. Like I've got my usual suite of podcasts that are an hour, 2 hours long. And this is the one that I will intersperse in between all of those podcasts. And there is a backlog. I am going through it, at a reasonable pace. But I've got a lot more to look forward to. And I think that anyone else that just appreciates words and etymology should check it out as well.
Oh, if we're sounding out to smart podcasts, I want to shout out to Lore.
I don't know Lore. Tell me about Lore.
Okay, so Lore is a really cool podcast where they take a phrase or a common idea. For instance, devil in the details or out for blood or anything like that. And not only do they go through the etymology of the phrase, but they like deep research the history that came along to this concept being something that we discuss and know as today, like going back to like the ancient origins, and just it's like a good like half an hour each episode of learning about a specific topic at an academic level that we just assume as common knowledge. And as a role-playing GM, it is good to mine this for fun details for your games.
That reminds me. So Patrick in the interview was explaining telegraphing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a pro wrestling fan, I definitely know telegraph as a term that the announcers will use, like, oh, the guy avoided that attack because he telegraphed it. He gave it away.
Mm-hmm.
Was this a new use of that phrase for you, telegraphing, when Patrick
No.
was explaining it?
Oh, in literature, telegraphing is pretty...
Okay.
Yeah.
Just the fact that he felt he needed to explain it, I was like, wait a second. How do I know this word? Oh, wrestling. Oh, is this just one of those weird things that I thought everyone knew, but I just happened to know for a very specific contextual reason? Okay. No, good to know. And John Bastille says that his dad was a cartographer and he did something similar for his maps of St. Paul. That is really interesting. And I'm going to check out the Lore podcast, Perram, because that also seems right up my alley.
Mm-hmm. Also, it's short episodes, and I know you love short episode podcasts.
Love them. I love, 15-minute episodes is the ideal length of a podcast.
We say on
I say as we're getting on hour 2 in a bit.
hour.
Perram, where can people find out more about the cool things that we were shouting out to, like James's blog?
At nodirectionpodcast.com, where you will find some of the most amazing content for Pathfinder, Starfinder, and general nerdity, including daily blogs from a fantastic stable of writers. And since going back to Patrick Renee, talking about the stable of artists and their stable of writers, I'm now thinking of going down the Gen Con artist alley, but just handing out sugar cubes.
I think they'll think that's condescending or confusing.
Definitely. But if you want to talk about condescending and confusing things, you can do so on our Discord channel, which is a link straight off of our website, nodirectionpodcast.com. And it is the chillest place to hang out and talk about Pathfinder. We don't allow any drama there. We just sort of hang out. And you'll be able to hang out with us, the different staff and writers and podcasters and personalities here at No Direction. And while you're there, you can also find our Discord link. Not our Discord link, but our Patreon link, because it is only through the support of our patrons that these podcasts are even possible. It keeps the lights on, people. We appreciate everyone who's able to help by becoming a patron. And there's a special patrons only section on the Discord where you can, chat about that and enjoy it. As well, you may find us at No Direction on YouTube. It's No Direction Show. On Twitter at No Direction, and on Facebook at facebook.com/No Direction. And we also have an unofficial Instagram.
Oh, that's right. I was like, unofficial. No, yeah, that's right. It is unofficial.
Yeah. Legend Novice runs it. It's fantastic. And that is No Direction over on the Instagrams.
And I just want to reflect on something you said about the Discord where it's like we don't allow drama. Drama just doesn't show up.
Right.
Like it is just chill by design, and it takes very little moderation and interference on our part. Like earlier this week, there was a conversation broke out about drugs in role-playing games and whether they, properly displayed the benefits that drugs can have. And I was like, well, this is something I'm going to keep an eye on. And it never went anywhere untowards. It always fit into the conversation, and it was an intelligent conversation on that topic. And so we just let it play out, and people moved on to the next topic as they do.
That's because our fans are awesome. We have the most awesome fans.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.